Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Space to Grow webinar. I'm Josh Clark. I am the Business Support Coordinator at the University of Essex, overseeing the Space to Grow and Angels at Essex programs. So Space to Grow helps entrepreneurs and investors get investment ready through a series of webinars like today's, from topics from tax all the way to social media, and of course, getting your pitch right. And the Angels at Essex platform is an equity investment platform where investors can interact with innovative businesses. So for more information on both platforms and to stay up to date on our latest events, please see our website and web pages on the University of Essex website and our social media pages as well, which are at UEZ Space to Grow. So it's very important to get your wording right when it comes to your pitch. That's why today we're bringing not one, but two expert content marketers in Tom and Marieke from Creative Quills, which is a content marketing agency. So what I'll do, I'll pass over to you, Tom, because I know you want to do a little intro and share a little bit more about Creative Quills.
Thank you very much, Josh. As Josh has given us the intro there, my name's Tom. I'm the director here at Creative Quills, and I'll be presenting today alongside my colleague Marieke, who's the head of content here. So what we're going to be looking at today is how we get the wording right for your pitch deck. So just to kick that off, a little bit about who we are and why we're talking specifically about wording. So we are Creative Quills, and we're a content marketing agency that is based in Colchester. We have our offices on the Knowledge Gateway at the University of Essex, and we are neighbours to the Innovation Centre here, so just a stone's throw away from where the Angels at Essex team would usually be based in normal times. So Creative Quills, we are a content marketing agency, and we specialise in providing marketing strategy, exceptional written content, and we also provide marketing training for our clients as well. So we've been working with the Angels at Essex team for probably about the last 6 months or so. And not only has that been to support them with their marketing and their outreach for the programme, but we've also been offering some advice and support for investees who are looking to join the Angels at Essex platform. So moving forward, yes, as we mentioned, today is very much about getting the wording right for your pitch decks. And we've broken down the presentation into two different parts. I'll be delivering the first part, and then I'll be handing over to Marieke halfway through, so she can do the second part of the presentation. And some of the things that we're going to be looking at over the course of the next, I guess, 40 minutes or so, we'll be telling a story, so covering what it is that investors want to hear. Looking at pitch essentials, so that will focus more around the structure of your pitch deck and what investors will be hoping to see or expecting to see when they come across your pitch. Then we'll look at easy wins, which will be a summary of some of the things that we've talked about previously, but then there'll also be some takeaway tips for you to use beyond this session. And then, as Josh has said there, we'll end on a Q&A, and it'll be an opportunity for you guys to ask us some questions, or also ask him some questions if it's anything specifically about the platform itself and the support that they offer. So just before we move on, one thing that I think is quite important to mention is that we'll be focusing primarily on the wording of pitch decks for this, but actually the principles that we're going to be talking about would still apply if you were doing a presentation verbally as well. So if you were actually delivering at a pitching event and standing in front of people, there's still a lot that you can take away from this that will help inform the type of pitch that you're going to be giving. So the first question we want to ask ourselves is, why focus on wording? And I think with any area of marketing, the branding and the design is going to be hugely important. It's what can initially grab the attention of the audience, of the person that you want to be engaging with. And if it's done in the right way, then it really helps get across the character of you and your organization, and also demonstrates your professionalism as well. All of that being said, it is the wording that's actually going to inform them of what it is you're trying to do, and also persuade them to get involved. So when you are speaking to an investor, what you have to remember is that the decision they're going to be making is one that is both emotional and pragmatic. And so what you want to be doing is really optimizing on both of these touch points to really make sure that you're making an impact with the pitch that you put across. So just having a look at the stat we've got here that's been sourced from the Harvard Business School, it says that successful pitch decks are only studied for an average of 3 minutes and 44 seconds, which when you consider the amount of time you've probably put into your pitch deck, as well as the amount of time you will have spent bringing your team together and developing your product, developing your service, it's not a huge amount of time. So really you want to be making sure that the text that you are putting across and that you are sharing really makes an impact. And you can do that in the following ways. You want to make it compelling, so that it actually retains the attention of the person who is reading it. You want to make it concise, make sure it's to the point, and it's actually tells them what you're asking for and why. And of course, make it informative, so that it actually provides enough information to make the person reading want to take things to the next stage and engage with you to start to build that relationship. So marketing is really, it's all about understanding the needs of your audience and then tailoring the message that you're sharing to meet those needs. And pitching is of course no different. So something that we do at Creative Quills regularly with our clients is to develop what we'd call customer or buyer personas, which builds a picture of the decision makers that we're trying to write the content for. And you can do exactly the same thing when you are putting together your pitch deck. You can create what you could broadly call an investor persona. And what this does is it helps you to map out who your target investors are, and then begin to speculate about the kind of things that are going to make them act and do the things that you want them to. When you get to this point of the exercise, I think it's really important that you take a step back and actually ask advice from someone who isn't as close to your work. You will have spent a lot of time focusing on the real kind of minutiae of what it is that you're doing, whereas what you want to get is the objective viewpoint of maybe a former colleague, maybe even reaching to somebody who could provide a professional service. And the point of having that objective viewpoint is that it really focuses on what the investors want to know, as opposed to what it is that you want to tell them. Ultimately, what you're trying to do throughout any type of pitch is help them to go on a journey. You want to take your investors on a journey with a story that will help them to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and the journey that you've been on, and makes them want to connect with the product that you are or service that you are pitching. So something that some of you out there may be familiar with, some of you may not, is the structure of a problem solution story. So what you're looking at here and how you can apply this to the pitching, you are looking at the audience, you're identifying who the hero of your story is, and then you're thinking about how the narrative is played out. So when you're looking at the hero of your story, the important thing is it's not you and it's not your product. It is your client, the person that this service or this product has been developed for. Now, it's really important to keep this in mind, because you want your audience, which as it says here will be the investor, you want that investor to relate to the problem and identify why the solution is going to make a difference. So thinking about the problem that you are posing, this is ultimately the villain in your story. So what you want to be doing is setting the scene for the investor that makes the problem that you are presenting feel familiar and relatable to them. Now, it might be something that they have experienced before. It might be something that's completely alien to them. But by presenting the problem in the right way, you can make them begin to feel, to empathize with that problem and to see that this actually exists in a real world environment. So ways in which you can do that, you can use data in order to support your argument. You can bring together case studies that show a use case for where that problem does exist. And as I say, this is all towards helping the investor to realize that it's a real life problem. It's something that does exist and does require a solution. One thing that is recommended is that you try to only focus on one problem in your pitch deck. The reason being that you can sometimes confuse things or dilute your pitch if it appears you're trying to solve too many problems at the same time. So the last thing to think about, we've got our problem. So now we need to explain in very clear and very simple terms how your service or your product solves that problem. So again, this is a great opportunity to bring in some evidence, and that may be survey data to actually demonstrate that there is a gap in the market for what it is that you're trying to launch, or it could be prototypes, ways in which you've thought about your product and how it could be developed over a period of time and mass produced for the marketplace. So what we're thinking about here as well, within the story that you're trying to tell, is that the underlying thing you want to get across is always that your business can meet its targets and will meet its targets, and that your investor will make money as a result of that. So one way in which you can get that kind of emphasis across would be to use language that really emphasizes a positive impact that you're going to have on the market or industry that you are operating in. You could use words such as saves, improves, increases, enhances, disrupts, of course, is a very popular one, all of which are really there as ways of hammering home this message that you are doing something that is really going to make a positive impact. So continuing to think a little bit more about the language that you're going to be using, what else is it that needs to come across in your pitch deck? We would argue that you need to make sure that there is passion in what it is that you're presenting. So investors will feed off the love for your product, and they'll also need to see that you have that spark, that little thing that says, you know, this person or this individual or this organization can go the distance, because you know, as a lot of you will know, it's not a simple or an easy journey going down this route as a startup business. It's a good way to get your passion across is to share a bit about your background. Tell the investor about your journey to date. How did you get to this point in your business? And ultimately, why is it important to you, what it is that you're trying to do? You can also introduce your team and share some of their talent as well, because investors will need to know that you have the people involved, who are capable of delivering what it is that you're promising. And also people who hopefully share your passion for what it is that you're trying to do. The next thing to think about is how you convey innovation and how you convey that what you're doing is innovative. So you can do this by really emphasizing your USPs. So how is the product that you have developed disrupting or transforming your industry? What is new about it, and actually why is it better than anything that's been done before, or things that are currently happening within that market? It's important to remember here actually that when we talk about innovation, it's not always about the product itself. That isn't what needs to be innovative. It could be your approach, and it could be what you're doing differently to others that is the innovation that you're bringing to the market. The last thing to convey is urgency. So you need to get across exactly why this matters and why it matters now. By getting that sense of urgency into what you're doing, it really encourages the investor to want to act, to want to do something and jump on board whilst the iron is hot, to use that old cliche. So we've had a little look there and talked about what investors want to know. So let's actually think about what investors will be looking for. So we've got another couple of stats here that have come from the Harvard Business School. And the first one is that investors spend most of their time looking at financials, team, and competition pages in pitch decks. And I mean, the statistic here that's quite shocking is that only 58% of pitches included a financials page. At least in obviously the ones that were surveyed as part of this report. So we've already talked about the fact that investors are making an emotional and pragmatic decision. So a strong pitch will blend both of these objectives. Emotionally, you want to engage with the investor and help them to actually connect with the product. But at the same time, and this is where the financials pages come in, you need to persuade them that it's a viable option and actually you can generate a return on interest for them, which is ultimately why they'd be looking to get involved with your company. We've talked about this as well, but using data is a really great way. If you can strip it back and take out some of the complexities, it's a really good way to tell a persuasive story about your product and really lay in very simple terms the impact that you can have on your industry and why they should invest. The final stat we've got here at the bottom says that 12% of investors look at pitch decks on their phone. So this is a very practical tip that you can take away. Be practical about your delivery. Make sure what you're doing is mobile friendly in the same way that you will have your website responsive across different screen sizes. And this is very simply about giving investors the opportunity to engage with your pitch deck in any way they want, wherever they may be. Make sure that they can get the information they need, as we've said all along throughout this part of the presentation, to make the decision to get in touch and take things to the next stage. So that is everything from me in part one. The next section will be delivered by Marieke, and this is where we're going to look at the pitch deck essentials.
Thanks, Tom. Tom has kindly agreed to be my assistant for this section because I'm having some technical difficulties. So when you hear me saying next slide, I'm talking to Tom. So as we've said before, I'm Marieke. I'm the head of content at Creative Quills. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more. We've talked about the narrative, the storytelling aspects. I just want to wrap everything up in a sort of usable form where we can look at all the sections that really need to be covered in your pitch or your pitch deck. And yeah, give you all the tools that you need to get started. And if you, well, I know most of you don't have a pitch deck yet, but when you put one together, just so you have a checklist that you can go over and say, okay, I've covered all the bases that I need to cover, and now I can start to get really creative. So these sections that you can see on the slide are what are considered, the essential sections of any pitch deck. And they're essential because they are what investors expect. This is, the minimum information that you need to include. And this is kind of a marketing principle for me anyway. I don't really believe necessarily in going too wildly experimental with form when you're trying to convey a message. You can be really innovative with your products, with your personality, with your team. Even, if you're presenting in person, your personality can shine through. You can jazz up your visuals as well. But I think in terms of the actual contents, there are expectations that need to be met. And what Tom was talking about is very true. The sort of rational part of the investor will want to see everything covered. So my advice is definitely make sure that you cover your fundamentals. So just to briefly talk through this list, we've talked about the problem and solution story and the way you can make that come alive for your investor. Then market is pretty self-explanatory. It's talking about the market for your product, the product itself. So any kind of essential information. If you have a technical product, for instance, that needs explaining, or, if you have a less technical product and you want to talk more, say you have a clothing line, for instance, it might be more visual or more technical, depending on what you're selling. And then the traction section, I think Wen's explaining. So basically, this is your customer validation. So it means the success that you've seen so far and or the proof that you have customers that are there and that are valuable and that have the money to spend. So, and then in purple are the sections that in Tom's section we identified as the ones that are the most, the most important, the ones that invest, well, yes, I suppose if investors spend the most time on them, they are by definition the most important. So a lot of people kind of neglect the team section or even leave it out, or, they just have the director there. I think this is a mistake. Basically, you want to demonstrate that you have people behind you who have faith in you, who have bought into you, who buy into your product, who have the capacity to deliver. So it's not just about showing faces. It's saying, you know, I have this squad behind me who believe in this product. It's not just me standing here on my own saying, I've got this crazy idea. There are other people who have confidence in you and conveying that, you know, it's not just the investor who's buying into it. There's a kind of community behind you with those professional skills who are backing you. So the next section, competition, self-explanatory, financials. I think Tom mentioned was it about half that didn't have financials pages? Obviously, that's a mistake. It does depend on the kind of pitch that you're delivering, how much you would talk about the amount that you would want to raise. But you know, just depending on whatever platform you're going onto, make sure that you're aware of expectations. And then, sorry, yes, so the amount being raised, obviously, being the next section. All right, next slide, please. Great. So this is about, again, fundamentals. How much do you include? So as we talked about, keep that in mind, 3 minutes and 44 seconds. How much can you read in 3 minutes and 44 seconds? I mean, that's like a newspaper article or two. It's really not a lot of time. It's, you know, it's an average music video. So if you have a pitch deck that is, you know, full of tangential information that goes on little sideways steps, people are just going to sort of skip through it. So it's better to just make sure that your pitch deck is punchy. So an average pitch deck has 15 to 20 slides. On Angels at Essex, the platform, they recommend 12 to 15 maximum. And I think a lot of people lose confidence a little bit and feel like they have to include so much information, that they have to include so much, you know, stats that are sort of relevant, but not necessarily, or, you know, details about the backstory of the company that perhaps an investor isn't necessarily going to connect with. So keep in mind that your pitch is the start of a conversation. It is, whether it's a verbal pitch or a pitch deck that is, you know, disseminated, it's only the start of a relationship, and you want to excite the investor. You want to make, you know, as Tom talked about, the rational and the emotional side want to be engaged, but it's not necessarily about, you know, providing every little detail or making them feel like they know exactly how this is going to play out. It's the start of a conversation. And you want to get them interested in following up with you. So I wanted to actually be a little bit cheeky and hand over to Josh for a second, because I've got a little slide about Angels at Essex. And it would be great, Josh, if you could just briefly introduce what Angels at Essex, the platform, is and what they do.
Yeah, thanks, Marieke. Yeah, so I touched on it at the start. So Angels at Essex is an equity investment platform where entrepreneurs can put up their deals if they're looking for funding, and our pool of investors can look at those deals and actually start those conversations with the entrepreneurs, and that hopefully in the end that leads to some form of funding for your business. So I think, yeah, the first thing I'd say is, if you are interested in learning more about Angels at Essex and how to actually get onto the platform as either an investor or an entrepreneur, please get in touch with us at uez@essex.ac.uk. I'll put the email in the chat in a moment. But I think what Marieke and Tom have shared already about the importance of wording and kind of capturing the imagination of investors is a really, really important for those businesses who are looking at going onto our platform and who are on our platform, because when an investor is looking through a portfolio of a number of different deals, it could be some kind of wording that actually catches their imagination and gets them to interact with a deal that eventually they might go on to fund. So this is all really important stuff, and thanks for that, Marieke, and I'll put the details of Angels of Essex in the chat as well.
Great. Sorry, that wasn't the end of my presentation, in case you thought so, but you can see Tom laughing in the small screen. But anyway, sorry, Tom, next slide, please. Great. Right, so thanks, Josh, for that little introduction. I just wanted to set the scene so that you know what Angels at Essex is. So if you are going onto an investment platform, there's different ones. Obviously, Angels at Essex is a relatively new one, and there's loads out there. But I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of template that you might come across if you are going onto an equity investment platform. So we'll take Angels at Essex as an example, but this applies to most platforms are structured this way. So you'll have a template where you can introduce your deal. These templates tend to include, obviously, the amount of words and space that you're allocated will vary. So you'll have your deal name, a little introduction, that's just a couple of sentences, and then a summary. And I think you should really think of this as, a movie trailer for the opportunity that you're advertising. Can I have the next slide, please, Tom? So you won't be able to read this, but that's okay. That I just took this from the guidance on Angels at Essex. So it's not about the content. It's just a little bit about the structure and what you can expect when you're on an investment platform. So at the top, you can see visual reality design for manufacture. That's the title. Again, when you're marketing an opportunity and you've got a small amount of time, attention, or space, really make full use of it. So this is quite a good example. Virtual reality design from manufacturer is very descriptive, but a lot of the time, people who go onto these platforms just put the name of their company. And again, I think that's a missed opportunity. I'm not saying don't put the name of your company, but imagine if Red Bull was a new company and they were on an investment platform. If they just put Red Bull, no one would know what they're selling, and they might be, an advertising agency, they might be selling Red Bulls, they might be an agricultural company, could be anything. But if you put Red Bull energy drinks, then people have context, and you're filtering out the people who wouldn't be interested anyway, and the people who might be interested in an energy drinks company will click through. And then you've got the line underneath that. So it says something about using virtual reality design. This is like a micro problem solution opportunity. So if you just have one sentence, use it to illustrate that problem solution story in the smallest, sharpest, most catchy way. And then the summary underneath, if you're on Angels at Essex, but also a lot of other platforms, the amount of money that you're trying to raise will already be in context around it. So you don't have to spend a lot of time in your summary reiterating that. It's again about briefly laying out the problem solution story, and also what the money will be spent on, I think is very important, because it gives investors an idea of where you're at on your journey. Okay, so much for my Angels at Essex pitch. Next slide, please. So I would like to just briefly summarize and give you some tips that will hopefully be helpful for when you're getting started. So you can hold this up against your pitch and ask yourself, am I meeting all of these rules, I guess you could call them. So keep it simple, arguably the most important one. Investors can't get excited about your idea if they can't understand it. A lot of investors, I am in no way trying to understate how expert they are or how, the kind of background knowledge that they have. But generally, when they're coming into something like this, an investment, they will have a generalized idea rather than specialist understanding of your industry or your product. You want to, especially if you're on a platform like Angels at Essex, you don't know who's going to be interested. So you have to keep an open mind and make sure that you're not alienating people by, using jargon and too many acronyms. You want to be really clear. Including too much technical information and complex data can confuse your pitch. So there's always more time in the future to elaborate on these things, but make sure you're really focusing on the product, what it can do, and your company's, goals. Less is more. So yeah, as I was saying, don't try to cram in as much information as possible. Always go through your slides and ask, is this of value? Could this be left out? What would it affect if I took out this slide or this section? Don't make your slides too text heavy. So hopefully this slide, practices what I preach as well. So yeah, try to keep it, visually not overwhelming. And use a sort of mixture of, stuff like lists or bullet points and graphics, and make your information digestible. So 2 questions that are really good to keep asking are, so what and why now? This comes back to, that urgency question. Why do you want to get someone to invest now, and what difference does your product make? Consistency is also important. This is more towards, the presentation. You want to use the same font sizes, colors, header styles throughout your slides, because otherwise it just becomes distracting. And then finally, this is something that Tom touched on as well, ask for help. As the person that is closest to your company, your product, your service, you know it inside out. You have all these ideas about why it's important, how it operates, but having all that knowledge in your head can make it really difficult to put yourself in the position of someone coming to it for the very first time. And especially true when you're talking about, an innovative solution or something technical. So it's super important to ask for input from other people that you trust and respect, who will give you feedback that you can work with. And of course, you can also go for a professional service. So at Creative Quills, we're actually offering a free 30-minute consultation if you want to talk about the wording that you're using to pitch your business. So I think that wraps up my section. And I believe that Josh had a poll that he wanted to run at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Marieke. Just before we get onto that poll, just want to say as well, in terms of there was a few people at the start who said they, didn't have a pitch deck at all, or maybe for those who are at the early stages and need help with kind of developing that pitch deck. Our team at the university do one-to-one sessions, free one-to-one sessions with businesses who are looking to raise investment by joining the Angels at Essex platform. So if that sounds like you, if you need some guidance on your pitch deck and in terms of structure and what to put in it, please do get in touch, and we can arrange a one-to-one session for you, completely free of charge, as everything we do is at the through the Space to Grow and Angels at Essex platform. So there's no fees for joining the platform for either entrepreneurs or investors. Say yes. So thanks again, Tom and Marieke, for today's session. So what we'll do now then is we'll open up for Q&As. So if there's any questions, please do put them into the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom there. In the meantime, we will I can see there's one question coming about sharing the slides. So Tom and Marieke, are you happy to distribute the slides? If you send them to us, we can send them out to our attendees.
We can do, and obviously you've got the video for it as well on your resources page. So the slides in themselves, as we've kind of talked about, we try to keep them quite text light. So in order to get all the context, probably the best thing would be to go on your platform and check out the video.
Yeah, that's it, and they'll be on our YouTube page as well. So if you're signed up to our newsletter, we will be detailing sending all of those resources within our next newsletter, which will go live at some point in the next couple of weeks, probably next week. So the question on what the YouTube channel is called, and that is Essex Startups. And I will link that in the chat in a moment for everyone. There's a couple of questions for both of you here. Has the nature and content of a pitch deck and changed now most companies pitch online?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. So just on that one, I'll just make a point of a pitch deck. An online pitch deck, like the pitch decks that we use on the Angels at Essex platform, do tend to be quite different to those if you were to pitch in person, because naturally they just have to include more words. So I guess the point to both of you would be kind of how much is too much in terms of the words for a pitch deck that's just online, and how do you adapt that kind of verbal pitch into words in a concise manner?
I think definitely the kind of events are different as well. I know that UEZ have run some online pitching events. There's been some pretty positive news recently about, the level of investment is actually very strong in the UK, regardless of the pandemic. But it does mean that online, a pitching event that would normally happen in person might move online, and it does make a difference in the kind of presentation that you do. If we're talking about, a presentation that you're giving virtually, in a way it has to be more slick. There's no opportunity for sort of chatter afterwards. You can't just, bump into each other in the hallway as easily and just have an informal chat. So I would say probably makes it a little bit less natural and potentially a bit more pressurized and anxiety inducing. But in my experience, preparation is kind of the best antidote to that. If you just make sure that you feel very confident, that you take the time, you put in the work, then that will always shine through. In terms of adapting your pitch deck, how do you balance it? I think, again, getting feedback is a very important step. Just having unbiased people look at it is very important, and they will be able to tell you, no, this bored me, this was really good, I read this whole thing and I still don't understand this, which I think is important. I don't know about you, Tom.
Yeah, I think what's interesting in I guess maybe it doesn't directly answer the question, but the difference between kind of, a pitch deck and actually pitching to people, we look back at that kind of 3 minutes and 44 seconds stat that you've got to get information across. Now, of course, when you're actually pitching to people directly, you do get a little bit longer. But I do think the important thing is not to abuse that. And to make sure that you're still taking into account keeping things concise, keeping things informative, and respecting that person's time. Just because they can't just click you off a screen; they'd have to physically, move. So I guess that's kind of previously pitching in front of people in person. Pitching online, I think it's as with anything, we're all having to adapt our training and what are now our webinars. We would have used to do in person in a room with people. And it is it's changing a lot of things, and I don't think necessarily for the worse either. I think, as Marieke said, it's a lot about preparation and going into it feeling confident with what you're presenting. And if that is what happens as a result of things, including pitch events, moving online, then I think that can only be a good thing. Because, as I say, it's really about getting across some really kind of core information, and doing enough to make somebody want to move to the next level.
Great, thanks guys. A few more questions coming through now. So one is about the kind of the wording and how you really catch the attention of investors. If, for example, your pitch deck is for a charity, which isn't necessarily aimed at making money or making a large profit, how could they, what kind of words or terminology or styles could they use in their writing?
I mean, we've talked about the balance between the emotional and the rational, or the pragmatic, and I think that is incredibly important with charities. You know, you're always gonna, or you should always be able to pull on that kind of emotional kind of tie in, because invariably a charity is doing something, you know, for the good of others. I think it really is then playing into the rational. I mean, in terms of, if the question is asking about people who are investing, you know, investing in that charity rather than donating, then I guess, you know, the same rules apply. The person who is doing the investment needs to understand what they're going to gain from that investment. And I suppose with a charity, it may well, it might not come down to a financial gain. It could be that, you know, they gain something else from that process of being involved and you know, parting with their money. So again, I think creating those, I talked in my part about creating an investor persona. So I think that could work really well for a charity, because you can begin to think about, well, you know, who are you trying to talk to and what is it that they're trying to gain? Because you're right, it might not be a kind of a typical route, which is, I'm going to put in, you know, this amount of money for my 10% and I expect this return within 3 years. You know, it could be a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think much of the same principles still apply, even though the return on investment is not financial. Still, you still want, well, there's still an expectation that you're going to deliver, much as any business or company. So it's about demonstrating impact, I would say. Understanding the kind of impact that your investor, or if someone's donating, is looking for, you still have to provide evidence in the same way. So you've got the emotional side, which is whatever good you're doing, but there's also the rational side, which is, you know, if you're, I don't know, building libraries, then you can still create predictions of how many people you're going to help, the amount of events that you're going to run. So I think you can still give very structured information, and that will set you apart from someone who is just only telling a story.
Great, thank you. And there's a question here about kind of the wording and style of a pitch deck from between different industries. I guess the, you know, differences between, for instance, a creative industry and other industries. So how do you feel that kind of changes things in terms of the wording and kind of the information that you're putting forward within your pitch deck? How do you think that changes things?
I think it does affect it, but obviously I can't really make a blanket statement about, you know, this sector and this sector. I think the most important thing in this case is to do research. Try to get advice from other professionals in your industry. If you can, get a look at pitch decks and sort of see how people are laying out information, see what they're doing visually. Obviously, if you're in a creative industry, there might be more of an expectation to be creative with, you know, the visuals, as long as the sort of core information is still present.
Yeah, I think as Marieke mentioned earlier on, what we've been talking about today is very much the fundamentals, and actually the way in which that may be presented will potentially shift from industry to industry and definitely from pitch deck to pitch deck. But I think again, without being able to talk with a huge amount of authority on your very specific example. Yeah, I would think a lot of the fundamentals we've talked about probably still apply, but what Marieke has said there is exactly right. Just spend some time, find some examples, and see if there are differences, what those differences might look like.
Brilliant, thanks both. I think one thing to end on then is how would attendees get in touch with you? I know you've got your emails there, but about what you touched on earlier in terms of the free session that you want to offer.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. As you said, our email addresses are there, so feel free to drop us an email, and we can obviously start a conversation. You can go through the guys at the UEZ as well, and hopefully, as well as giving you some tangible bits and pieces you can take away. It's encouraged you to want to get in touch with Josh and the team and learn more about their platform as well. So that's another way that you can then come through to us, and we're on LinkedIn as well. So yeah,
we have a website as well. If you just
and we have a website.
Have a look,
crikey,
yeah. We're everywhere.
But you almost can't avoid us. Yeah, so as I say, if you reach out to us, and we'll make those kind of initial introductions. Marieke said it there. We offer a 30-minute consultation just to just talk through the wording if you've got any other kind of specific questions, and we can we can start talking from there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Marieke.
Thanks, Josh.
And yeah, so that's it for today's webinar. So thank you for attending. So these Space to Grow webinars are pretty much on a weekly basis now up until the end of March. So keep an eye out on next week's events. They'll be happening on Tuesday and Wednesday at 2 p.m. So our events page you'll be able to find a full list there. And if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you will receive notifications of those as well. And yeah, so thank you again for coming, and thank you very much to Tom and Marieke for spending the time today to give that presentation. I thought it was very good and very informative, and hopefully again we'll have you back again to maybe do a follow-up session in the future.
Cool. Thank you for the invite.
Brilliant.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.